2 years ago, I was going to make a video about the entire Disney Fairies franchise. And then I had some technical difficulties, so I split it into parts. I did a video on the books, which I was a big fan of as a kid. And I was going to do a video on the movies, which I was not a fan of as a kid. And then I got distracted researching the troubled production of the first Tinkerbell movie. So I made a video on that. And so then I delayed making a video on the movies. It felt weird to make 3 Tinkerbell videos in a row. Also, at that point, I had only made 3 videos. So if I made a 4th video about Tinkerbell, 75% of all of my videos would have been about Tinkerbell, which I do like talking about Tinkerbell that much. But I didn't know if that was the impression I wanted people to have of my channel. So I didn't do it then, and then I've been putting it off. But I recently found this Rosetta costume on Depop. The costume itself is by Angel Secret, which is what a lot of princess party performers use. You know, the people who go to kids' birthday parties and pretend to be the characters. And the wings, I believe, are from an Etsy seller, and it was bundled together in this Depop listing. And the measurements of this costume are quite similar to my measurements, so it really felt like fate. And I was like, okay, I'll buy it. When I eventually make the Tinkerbell movie video, I will wear this as my costume. And then I realized, uh-oh, if I want this costume to be a tax write-off, I have to use it within the calendar year that I bought it. I can't wait another 2 years and then try and write this off. That's not how it works. So I guess we're gonna do this video now because of the IRS. It's kind of hard to get a full body shot with my setup, but here it is. I'm wearing a bandeau, which you can kind of see, and then a corset, which is what the wings are tucked into. The measurements are close to mine, but not exactly. Like you can see there's a lot of extra fabric here, so I might take it in at the sides. Which thankfully, I have the sponsor of today's video, Craftsy. Craftsy is your online resource for all things creative. They have over 2,000 classes in over 20 creative skills like sewing, quilting, knitting, crochet, art, and baking. The classes have step-by-step instructions from experts and even have additional downloadable resources. So for tailoring this costume, there's Tailoring Ready to Wear by Angela Wolf, which shows you how to do various clothing alterations like hems and sleeves. Almost all of my wardrobe is secondhand, and I think being able to alter clothes gives you a lot of freedom with that. I've also been working on a Disney Fairies cross stitch, and shocker, the kit I'm working from is bad at teaching you to actually do cross stitch. So I liked Cross Stitch Basics and Beyond by Jeanette Douglas. If you're interested in learning with Craftsy, the first 1,000 people to click the link in the description will get a full year of premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49, only valid for new members. Thank you, Craftsy. So if you didn't know, the Disney Fairies franchise started with books. The first book, written by Gail Carson Levine and published in 2005, was Fairy Dust and the Quest for the Egg. And this established a lot of the lore. Whenever I've talked about people who have written books for Disney, I always look into them and they say that they had a ton of creative freedom, which is odd because I think of Disney as running a bit of a tighter ship than that. But I think what's happening is that Disney is willing to ignore whatever these people write. They are not worried about plot holes or inconsistencies. So that's what happened with the Tinkerbell movies. They used a lot of the book world building, but also a lot of it is very different. Which initially, Disney framed the Tinkerbell movies as though they were within the same timeline of the books, just very far in the past. And that was meant to explain any differences between the two. This was always kind of a flimsy excuse. I don't think they were ever planning on coming up with full explanations for any of these inconsistencies. And then, with the troubled production of the first Tinkerbell movie, they ended up scrapping their initial plot and completely starting over. And so then the Tinkerbell movie ended up even more different from the books than they initially intended. They pretty quickly abandoned this justification that the books and the movies were connected because the movies were very successful and they didn't have to cater to the book fans anymore. They stopped making things that used the book canon and now they just pretend it doesn't exist. Which, child Sarah really liked those books. And I did not like that the movies were different. I was a fan of the books when the first movie was coming out, and so I bought into this prequel explanation. I was like, yeah, the Tinkerbell movie is just really far in the past, and that's why it's different. But I thought they were gonna, explain it. And so I got more annoyed as the movies went on and I realized, oh, that's not happening. I only remember watching the first Tinkerbell movie. It must have been on Disney Channel or something because we don't have the DVD. These were direct-to-DVD movies, if I haven't said that. But I do remember seeing trailers for the later movies and being annoyed about it. So let's start with the only one of these movies I actually saw as a child, Tinkerbell from 2008. This is an origin story of Tinkerbell, so we see how Tinkerbell is born. In the Disney fairies world, fairies are born of a baby's first laugh. This was in the books. The laugh then travels to Pixie Hollow, which is where fairies live in Neverland. The little society of fairies. Then Queen Clarion welcomes Tinkerbell to Pixie Hollow. Queen Clarion is the queen of the fairies, and she's played by Angelica Houston. And then we meet Tinkerbell, who is played by Mae Whitman, which is funny because the two celebrity lookalike comments I get all the time are Mae Whitman and Abigail Breslin. Recently, I've started getting Anna Kendrick. I do not look like that woman. I think people are reacting to my voice, kind of snarky and sassy, but I do not look like Anna Kendrick. Not that that would be a bad thing, I'm just saying, like, we have very different faces. But I do kind of look like Mae Whitman, so props for that. It's interesting that this movie is 2008, because the performance that Tinkerbell is giving is very similar to, like, Anna from Frozen or Rapunzel, that kind of character. She's sort of a precursor. So Queen Clarion gives Tinkerbell pixie dust. Fairies need pixie dust to fly and do magic, and you get a fairy-sized teacup full every day, just like dumped on your head, which is in the books. In the books, pixie dust comes from the feathers of a magical bird named Mother Dove, who's like an omniscient, godlike creature for the fairies. And she sits on an egg that represents all of the magic of Neverland. In the movies, all of the pixie dust comes from a magical tree called the pixie dust tree. I think the bird is one of the first things they cut. I think they were like, we're not using this weird bird. And I agree with them. I don't think that would have translated. Then Tinkerbell has to do a talent ceremony. So in the books, all of the fairies have a special talent. This is a specific skill that is the type of magic that they are able to do. And every fairy has one. It's not unique to each individual fairy. There's like talent groups. And the types of talents you can have are either like nature elemental talents. So you could be a water fairy, a garden fairy, which means plants, a light fairy, or your talent can just be a normal human skill, like an art fairy, a baking fairy, a healing fairy, or a scout fairy. Tinkerbell is a tinker talent fairy, and I wonder if her name being Tinkerbell inspired the whole talent thing. So a tinker talent fairy does tinkering, like building, repairing items, making new items, inventing things. I'm sure you're wondering, how does that involve magic? If I'm remembering correctly, it's sort of implied in the books that tinker talents imbue the things that they're making with magic. So like you're repairing a pot and now the pot is always going to cook at the correct temperature or something like that. It's kind of flimsy. It's not really that magical, especially when you have like water benders off to the side. I get to repair the queen's bathtub. Cool. But in the books, it is framed as though a person's talent is their passion in life. It's the thing they care the most about. They really love doing it, even if it's kind of lame. And I feel like it's sort of meant to be in the books that people can have all different interests and things that they're into. And you may not understand, but that's okay, because it's just complicated web of society and humanity. Fairy-dity. That's nothing. Also in the books, you show up knowing what your talent is. Like, the laugh comes to Neverland and you arrive fully formed and you're like, hello, my name is Tinkerbell. I am a Tinker Talent Fairy. In the movie, they've turned this into a ceremony, which I understand. It's a little bit more cinematic. There's a bunch of symbolic objects representing different talents on pedestals, and you walk around to them and see if they glow. And so Tinkerbell walks past a hammer, and the hammer glows and is like magnetically drawn to her. It's the strongest anyone's ever had a talent. The extent to which she is a Tinker Talent is more than anyone has had any talent ever. And then the little girl group who's going to be Tink's friends later, they're like, I've never seen that before, not even for Vidya. So Vidya is a fast-flying talent fairy, which basically means like wind and air elemental, and she can also fly very, very fast, faster than a normal fairy. She is a major character in the books, all the way back from that first Gail Carson Levine book. And she's fun because she's like a mean and selfish fairy in this generally very kind and welcoming society. And so now Vidya's upset. She's jealous that Tinkerbell is such a strong tinker talent, even though Vidya doesn't like tinker talents. It's just the principle of the thing. So then Tinkerbell gets introduced to our comic relief tinker talent fairies, Clank and Bauble. They are British. I don't know why some fairies are British and some fairies are not. One of you is going to argue it depends on the human who laughed the laugh that became the fairy, and I disagree with that because I think that the laughs generally all come from England because this is a Peter Pan adaptation, loosely. I think the movie makers just thought it would be funnier if Clank and Bauble had British accents. So Clank and Bauble give Tink a tour of Pixie Hollow. And in the movies, Pixie Hollow is split up into a region for each of the 4 seasons. So there's a winter realm, summer realm, spring realm, and fall realm. And the fairies are responsible for bringing the changes of the season to the mainland, which is the human world. In the books, there is nothing to do with seasons. Pixie Hollow isn't split up into seasons, and they definitely don't travel to the mainland, basically ever, and definitely not to change the seasons. So, as a child, I did not love this. First of all, I was a nerdy little child, and so I was like, that's not how seasons work. Seasons are because of the Earth moving closer and further away to the sun. And it almost felt kind of condescending, as though Disney was thinking, oh, little kids will think this is cool and magical, that fairies change the seasons, and not, science. But I was like, I'm 7 years old. I know how the seasons work. How dare you? It also just sounds like a logistical nightmare. Like, how are we changing the seasons? We only ever see them doing London, which is where Peter Pan is set. There's a whole rest of the Earth. And to make things more complicated, the Southern Hemisphere has completely opposite seasons. And it seems like they change the seasons all at once, like Santa Claus, like they show up and boom, overnight, it's springtime now, which that's not how it works. I also, and this is going to come up quite a few times, don't like the fairies to have any connection to the human world. I like the fairies living their life away from people. I don't even really want to acknowledge that the human world exists. I think it makes it way less magical. That's part of why I don't like when they bring up Peter Pan, because when they bring him up, that means they're probably also going to bring up London and the human world. But also separately, I just don't like any of the Peter Pan stuff. Now, with this first movie, we were still keeping up this pretense that this is the same timeline as the books, which in the books, there is nothing to do with the seasons. So how did that happen? Why did they stop changing the seasons? What happened to Pixie Hollow to where it doesn't have season realms anymore? I think part of this disconnect is when they scrapped the original version of the Tinkerbell movie, they added in all of the season stuff in the new version of the movie. So originally the Tinkerbell movies weren't going to have anything to do with the seasons, which would have been more in line with the books. This was a fairly last-minute addition, and so I don't think they ever had an explanation as to how this tied into the books. I don't think they cared. I recognize that the whole season thing is a very successful part of this franchise, aesthetically using the motifs of different seasons. It's a big part of, like, the merch or whatever. And it gives the fairies a tangible goal, which is good for, like, plot reasons. But I've been salty about this since 2008, so I still get to complain. But then Clank and Bauble take Tinkerbell to Tinker's Nook, which is the little valley where all of the Tinker talents do their work. And they show her her house, which they have stocked with these green leaf dresses, but they're too big for her because they didn't know how big she'd be. So then she refashions the dress into her iconic little mini dress. It's always funny when origin stories do this. They're like, we need to know how she got the dress. Like, did we need to know that? I don't know. But it shows her tinkering, I guess. I don't know if they have sewing talents in the movies. Then we meet Fairy Mary, who oversees the Tinker talents. She is also British. Then Tink goes with Clank and Bobble to transport some supplies. And we meet Cheese, the mouse. Because fairies are only 6 inches tall, they use this mouse as like a horse, basically. It's very cute. There's not really that much cheese in the later movies, which is a bummer. But then their wagon is chased by sprinting thistles, which are magical weeds that have like legs and run around. But they are able to outrun them and make it to the spring meadow where everyone is putting all of the spring preparations. And then we meet 4 fairies. There's Rosetta. She is a garden talent fairy. And she's kind of a Southern Belle diva. She's played by Kristen Chenoweth. She is my favorite. There's Iridessa, who is a light talent fairy. And she's very anxious and high-strung. She's played by Raven Simone. There's Silver Mist, who is a water talent fairy. She's kind of dreamy. She's played by Lucy Liu. And Fawn, who's an animal talent fairy. She's kind of a tomboy, and she is played by America Ferrera, but only for this movie. And the girls explain to Tinkerbell that fairies go to the mainland to change the seasons. And Tink is very excited about this. As Tink, Clank, and Bobble are headed back, Tink sees Vidya. And Vidya is collecting pollen from flowers using little tornadoes. And Tink goes and introduces herself, but Vidya already hates her. She's like, ugh, your talent is lame. Tinker talents aren't as important as fast-flying talents. And Tinkerbell is like, well, I'll prove to you how important Tinker talents are when I go to the mainland. And we see Vidya's reaction, which is at first kind of confused and then very cruel. And we understand from this that Tinker talents do not go to the mainland. And she's not going to tell Tink. She's just going to let her figure it out for herself. And she's excited to see the fallout of that. Tink angrily flies away. And then on the beach, she sees some lost things, which is human items that have washed up on shore. And she collects some of them to bring them back to Tinker's Nook, but Fairy Mary says that they're junk. That night, Queen Clarion is going to review the preparations for spring, and so Tinkerbell makes some inventions to show off to Queen Clarion. And so she interrupts the whole thing and shows Queen Clarion her inventions, which don't really work. And then Queen Clarion explains to her that Tinker talents don't go to the mainland. Only the nature talents do. And Tinkerbell is very embarrassed and heartbroken, and she goes back to Tinker's Nook. And when she's in Tinker's Nook, she complains to Fairy Mary that being a Tinker stinks, and she can't go to the mainland. And Fairy Mary is like, well, you're not a nature talent. If you were able to bend light or hold water, you'd be able to go, but you can't. You're a tinker. And then Tinkerbell takes the wrong message from this conversation, and she's like, wait, what if I could switch my talent? So she asks her friends to help her, and she's going to try out all of their talents. She tries to be a water fairy and a light fairy, which both go poorly, which the other Tinker talents, Clank, Bobble, and Fairy Mary, figure out what she's doing, and they're upset with her because they're all proud of being Tinker talents, and they like being Tinker talents. And Tinkerbell is really poo-pooing the whole talent. Then Tinkerbell tries to be an animal talent fairy, and a hawk shows up, which hawks are predators for fairies. And Tinkerbell hides, but she's hiding in the same hiding spot as Vidya, so then Vidya gets out of the hiding spot, but she ends up right near the hawk, and all of the fairies pelt the hawk with nuts and berries to get it to go away, but then Vidya ends up all messy and embarrassed. So now she's even more mad at Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell is flying back home after this, and she finds a music box that has washed up on the shore. And so she fixes it up, and her friends find her, and they're like, this is so cool. This is Tinker talent stuff. You should be proud of this. You're really good at this. And so now her friends no longer want to help her switch her talent. They think that she should just commit to being a Tinker talent. But Tinkerbell, of course, has still not given up. So she goes to Vidya, and she's like, will you help me switch my talent? Rosetta won't even help me become a garden fairy. She's given up on me. And then Vidya, because she's conniving, is like, well, you could probably be a garden talent fairy if you capture all of the sprinting thistles. And Tinkerbell's like, okay, I'll try. And she's actually doing an okay job of it. She makes a corral and is riding on Cheese with a lasso in her hand. But then Vidya sabotages her, and way more sprinting thistles show up, and it's way more than Tinkerbell can handle. And then the sprinting thistles storm the spring preparations. And they like run all over everything and knock things over, and some things are destroyed. Paint gets everywhere, so now everything that had to be painted is messed up. And so now spring is ruined. Spring cannot happen on time because spring is supposed to happen like tomorrow. So everything is ruined, and it's all Tinkerbell's fault. And also Vidia's fault, but no one knows her involvement. And Tinkerbell's so embarrassed and upset. And so she's going to leave in the middle of the night in disgrace. So she goes to the pixie dust tree to get some extra pixie dust. And she asks Terrence, the dust keeper fairy, for some pixie dust. Terrence is also a long-standing book character. And in the movie, he is played by Jesse McCartney. And Terrence is surprised that Tinkerbell remembers him and knows his name. He's like, I'm just the dust keeper guy. And Tinkerbell's like, no, dust keepers are so important. You should be proud of your talent. And there's a meaningful pause. And then he's like, I am. And Tinkerbell's like, wow, maybe I should be proud of my talent too. So then Tinkerbell goes back to Tinker's Nook and she finds her inventions, which she was trying to invent things that would make spring preparations faster and more efficient. And she adjusts the inventions to incorporate lost things. So like a spring or a coin, a screw or something. And so she brings the inventions back and she's like, give me one more shot. I fixed them. I know I ruined everything, but at this point, what do we have to lose, you know? And Vidia's like, are we really going to listen to her? But then Vidia accidentally admits that she told Tinkerbell to capture the sprinting thistles. And so now she's in trouble. And then with the help of Tinkerbell's inventions, we are able to reorganize everything like overnight. It's not as though they were starting from scratch. Like a lot of the stuff they just had to recollect and put back in baskets, you know? But they do have to like repaint all the ladybugs or whatever. And they're able to do it within the night. And so the next morning, it is time to go to the mainland and change the season from winter to spring. And it is decided that Tink is allowed to go. And weirdly, at first her reaction is like, no, guys, I don't even care about that anymore. It's fine. Which I think is silly. I think she should have just been excited. But the justification for her going is that Clank and Bobble are going to help her bring the music box back to London, and she's gonna find the little girl who the music box belongs to and reunite the girl with her music box. So we triumphantly go to the mainland, we see the nature talent fairies transform seemingly just garden into springtime, and then Tink goes off on her own to find the girl who owns the music box, and it's Wendy from Peter Pan. Roll credits. The end. Then there's an end credit song by Selena Gomez, which I get a lot of Disney Fairies TikToks, and people love to use this Selena Gomez song, so I have heard this song too many times. Pick a different song, people. Watch all the flowers dance in the wind. So the theme of this movie, I guess, is supposed to be that you need to be yourself and don't let anybody get you down and be proud of who you are. But in this case, who you are has been predetermined by fate and announced at your birth, which is weird because that's not really applicable to the children who are watching. Having a destiny and a calling that you know about from birth. And then it's interesting this movie's approach to a talent-based society. Because if you take the creative writing exercise of a society where everyone is born with a talent, I'm sure your first thought is, what if someone wasn't born with a talent? Which is part of the plot of Fairy Dust and the Quest for the Egg. Like, that was Gail Carson Levine's first thought also. And then I guess your second thought would be, can you change your talent? Like, can you change your destiny? And this movie's answer is no. No, you cannot. You need to just accept what you have been given. Which generally in the books, the talents are presented so positively. Everyone is happy with their talent. I can't think of a single person who's unhappy with the talent they have. So this never really comes up in the books. And there's also not a hierarchy in the books. In the movies, separate from just personal preference as to what talents you personally think are cooler, which, you know, probably it is the nature talents. From a societal structural level, the nature talents do have special privileges that all of the other talents do not. They are within this society considered better, ? In the books, there is friendly competition and people having talent group pride, but in the books, all of the talents are equal. It's not like one group gets to do special things, which we also never answer the question, Why don't Tinker talents go to the mainland? You know? I guess because this is like almost a targeted military operation. Like, you get in, change the season, get out. Don't get caught by the humans. And I guess because the Tinkers don't have like a job to do, they would be messing up the operation. They'd get in the way or be a distraction or something. But they never say that. They always just say, Tinkers don't go to the mainland. No explanation, is just a fact of life. They don't go. And then the ending of the movie is not that Tinkers are now allowed to go to the mainland. It's that because of special circumstances, Tinkerbell only can go to the mainland, with her friends Clank and Bobble to help carry this music box. I don't know, I feel like this movie has sort of odd messaging, but I also know that it was kind of rushed. So that might be part of why. The next movie is Tinkerbell and the Lost Treasure from 2009. This is an autumn-themed movie. So when they came up with the idea of the seasons, they decided that they would do a movie for each season. So this is our autumn movie. We start out with Terrence at the Pixie Dust Depot, where they process the pixie dust. And he's going to visit Tinkerbell because he has a crush on her, which does come from the books. In this movie, Tinkerbell is characterized as having a bad temper, and she blows up when things don't work out. She isn't always characterized that way in these movies, but I like it when she is. I know that in Peter Pan, though I like to ignore it, Tinkerbell is very feisty and angry. And then I also think it's just relatable for kids to have a character who gets very upset. So then, Tinkerbell is called in to see Queen Clarion, and she's asked to make a scepter for a pixie dust ritual. There is this ancient moonstone that's very, very fragile, and every 8 years when there's a blue moon, the blue moon's light goes through the moonstone and makes blue pixie dust. And we need a scepter to like ritualistically hold this moonstone in front of the blue moon. The blue pixie dust revitalizes the pixie dust tree, and without it, the pixie dust tree would not be able to make any more pixie dust. So it's a very important, sacred Pixie Hollow ritual. And they say that a different talent makes it each time, which is odd, because I would assume it's a Tinker talent each time, and it's just like, you pick a different Tinker talent fairy. No, apparently a different talent group makes it each time, which I don't know if the water talent fairies are good at building scepters. That doesn't seem like it's within their wheelhouse, but I don't know. Again, we're sort of undercutting the idea that the Tinker talents have anything magical to do with them at all. It's like, oh, just anyone can build things. It's not special to the Tinker talents. Okay. So Tinkerbell is very excited, and Terrence offers to help because he's a big pixie dust nerd. And at first it's nice, but then she starts finding him very annoying. He's like kind of hovering too much, making noise. As someone who also likes to work alone, I find this very relatable. Get this man out of my workshop. So then she sends Terrence out to get a sharp thing. She needs to do something with something sharp. Whatever. She sends him out to get a sharp thing. And then he comes back with a compass. A compass that's like the size of a fairy, because it's a human compass. And it does have a sharp thing, the needle that points north. But she's incredibly irritated. She's like, this is a round thing, which is the opposite of a sharp thing. What do you... And then because the compass is round, it rolls and smashes her scepter. And so now Tinkerbell is pissed and she kicks him out. And then in her fit of rage, she kicks the compass, and then the compass flies open and smashes the very fragile moonstone. So now everything's destroyed. She tries to put the moonstone back together, and that does not work. And she's like panicking. And then her friends invite her to go see the fairy tale theater, which at first she's like, no, I'm busy and also panicking. But then she realizes that Fairy Mary is going to be there. And she can ask Fairy Mary if there's maybe like an extra moonstone. And Fairy Mary's like, no, there isn't. Why? What's happening with the moonstone? Tinkerbell's like, nothing. Don't even worry about it. Everything's great. And Tinkerbell tries to leave, but she's now kind of trapped. So she has to stay and watch the performance. And the performance is a legend about a magical mirror that you can wish on. And the mirror only has one wish left, and it's lost somewhere north of Neverland. and the legend has some clues as to how to find it. And so Tinkerbell's like, great, I'll go find this mirror and wish for a new moonstone. But because she has to go north of Neverland, she's going to need some extra pixie dust. As we know, everybody only gets 1 cup of dust per day. She tries to ask Terrence for some extra dust, but she won't tell him why, and they're both still very mad at each other. So it turns into a fight. So Tinkerbell isn't getting any extra dust. So instead, she invents a pixie dust hot air balloon with like a big cotton ball that she sprinkles some pixie dust on, and then it floats. And so you're able to use way less dust to travel way farther. And so she flies away without telling anyone. On the journey, she meets a firefly who becomes her friend. She names it Blaze. Fairly early on in her journey, she loses her balloon with all of her supplies in it. But then some friendly insects help her out. She has to pass a troll bridge, and the 2 trolls are fighting with each other even though they're friends. Meanwhile, back in Pixie Hollow, Terrence decides that he's gonna go and try to apologize to Tinkerbell. Make the first step. But then he sees that she's gone. Meanwhile, Tinkerbell finds the shipwreck where the mirror is allegedly supposed to be. And she finds the mirror, but then she accidentally wishes for her firefly friend to be quiet and wastes her 1 wish. And now she's super upset because she made it all this way, but then she ruined everything because she was angry again. But then Terrence shows up. He followed her and he found the hot air balloons. Now we have that back. And they work together to get back home. And on the way, they realize that they can use all of the different shards of the moonstone as like a bunch of prisms. As opposed to just the 1 big round crystal, it's like a bunch of little disco ball crystals. And thank goodness this works. And we get our closing narration saying that the real treasure is friendship. The end. And then the end credit song is Demi Lovato. I like this movie. I don't know if that's a popular opinion, because it is kind of simple. Tink is alone for a lot of it. But I think it's really strong thematically. Every step of her journey has to do with friendship. Tinkerbell in her anger is her own worst enemy. I like Tink and Terrence together, not as a couple. I know Terrence has a crush on her, but I don't really want that to go anywhere. I would prefer this to just stay like a one-sided crush situation. I don't want Tink and Terrence to be like a couple. I think Tink should continue to just be sort of a free agent, you know? And I think Disney agrees with me. I think they've had opportunities to progress this relationship further, and they have firmly stayed away from that. Another interesting detail about this movie is that it is loosely based on a Disney Fairies book, which is called Tink North of Neverland. There's a lot of elements of that book that they repurposed in this movie. But I think this movie is stronger than that small little chapter book. I also love the vibes and the aesthetic of this movie. It's very moody. I think part of that is because it's so autumnal, but we're going through these grand magical locations, this whimsical hot air balloon. I think it looks a lot better than the first movie. The next movie is Tinkerbell and the Great Fairy Rescue from 2010. Some of the fairies are going to be spending the summer on the mainland. I don't think that's how this worked previously. What? If it's summer, don't you guys need to start prepping for autumn? Why are you just like hanging out on the mainland? They've made like multiple camps, but all in this same area. I feel like I never got a justification as to why they're doing this. The reason why is because for the plot, they need to be on the mainland, but that's not a good reason. So they're all on the mainland, inexplicably, and they have to stay hidden from the humans. And Tink, of course, is like, there's humans nearby? How exciting! And everyone's like, no, please don't. But then we cut to the humans in question. They are a father and daughter who are staying in a summer cottage. The daughter is like a 7-year-old girl named Lizzie, and the father is an entomologist. He's, I think, named like Mr. Griffiths, Dr. Griffiths, something like that. It doesn't matter. He's played by Michael Sheen, which I think is funny. I like Michael Sheen. But this Michael Sheen father character is too preoccupied with his work to play with his child. Because of course he is. When they get to the cottage, they see a mispainted butterfly because the fairies messed up painting a butterfly. And now it's just flying around out in the open with paint splatters. And Lizzie says that fairies paint butterfly wings. And the father is like, Lizzie, you know that fairies aren't real. And you're like, oh, brother, is this going to be the whole movie? So then Tinkerbell is exploring outside, and Vidya follows her, because Vidya's here, and she's worried that Tinkerbell's going to do something reckless and stupid, which is fair. Tinkerbell first investigates their car, which is like an old-timey automobile, because this is old-timey London, and then she finds a trail of buttons on the ground. She starts collecting them, but the buttons lead to a little fairy house that Lizzie made, and Tinkerbell is investigating the fairy house, and Vidya is afraid that they're gonna get caught. She's urging Tinkerbell, like, come on, we gotta get out of here. And at some point she slams the door to try and scare Tinkerbell to, like, get her to come out. But instead that just jams the door, so now Tinkerbell is trapped in this fairy house. And then, of course, Lizzie comes to check on the fairy house and sees that there is a fairy in there. So she takes the fairy house with Tinkerbell inside the cottage. And so Vidya rushes back to the camp for help. And now a storm is starting outside. Lizzie goes to show Tinkerbell to her father to prove that fairies are real, but then she sees all of his pinned butterflies and is like, actually, maybe I shouldn't show my father this small winged creature. So she keeps Tinkerbell a secret and brings Tinkerbell to her room. At first, Tinkerbell is scared, rightfully so. Lizzie puts her in like a bird cage, and there's this big fat cat who seems fairly evil. But then Lizzie starts asking Tink a lot of questions about fairies, and Tinkerbell is amused by all of this inaccurate information that Lizzie has picked up. Then Lizzie's dad comes in and shows her some of his old field journals and an empty field journal that she can fill with her own research. I'm not going to be super harsh on this Victorian era father trying to connect with his daughter. I don't know if we ever get clarification as to whether he's a single father or not, which would add another layer to this. But it is funny. Like, bro, your daughter does not want to look at your rock and mineral research. You need to bring her a volume of The Secret Garden or something, and that'll help you connect. But Lizzie decides to make a fairy field journal with all of her research based on her conversations with Tinkerbell. When fairies talk to humans, it just sounds like bells jingling to them. So they have to communicate through miming and writing. Not even really writing. Like, Tinkerbell sometimes nudges the pencil that Lizzie is holding to guide her in a different direction. But it's not like Tinkerbell is writing essays explaining fairy culture to her. But I learned that I do not have the patience for charades. Even just Tinkerbell trying to communicate her name to Lizzie, I was like, dear God. Tinkerbell fixes the door of the fairy house, and Lizzie is like, oh, you're quite the little tinker. And then Tinkerbell's, yeah, like, yes, me, Tinker. And then she rings a bell, and Lizzie's like, oh, is that your name? Bell? You have to be like, no, Tinker. No, Tinker plus Bell. Huh. I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. Please don't make me sit through this. It's like party games in an improv class. Meanwhile, the other fairies are doing a rescue attempt. But unfortunately, fairies cannot fly with wet wings. This goes all the way back to the first book. Some people like to argue about it, of like, well, if you just sprinkle pixie dust on a human, they can fly and they don't have wings. How come it matters that fairies' wings are really wet? And the explanation, I guess, is that fairies' wings are very absorbent, so they get super heavy, and if you were trying to run and one of your legs had like a weight attached to it, that would be hard. It's maybe more of a psychological thing of like your limbs are messed up as you're trying to fly. Like, I don't know. I guess it doesn't super make sense, but it's such an ingrained part of the Disney fairies lore. Like, it goes all the way back to the beginning that I don't personally question it. I'm just like, yeah, fairies can't fly when their wings are wet. Why would they be able to? Maybe it's like a steering problem. I don't know. But there's a horrible storm outside. And so if they were to try and fly through it, they would get wet. And so they make a boat to make it to the house. So it's going to be Rosetta, Iridessa, Silver Mist, Fawn, Vidya, Clank, and Bauble. They take the boat in like the rain gutters or something, but then the boat capsizes and they have to continue on foot. Vidya admits to them that she was the reason that Tink was trapped in the fairy house, and she apologizes. And they all forgive her. They're like, it would have been worse for Tink if you weren't there, because she probably wouldn't have left anyway, and then no one would have known what happened to her. Like, It's not that big of a deal. It's fine. Meanwhile, the rain has let up, so Tinkerbell is going to fly back to camp. Lizzie was going to let her fly back earlier, but it was raining, so she wasn't able to fly in the rain. But now it's time for her to go. Lizzie goes to show her dad her field journal of all of her fairy research, but her dad doesn't have time for her. He's fixing the leaks all over the house, and he's worried about the presentation that he's going to do to the museum committee or whatever. He's going to bring that butterfly with the mispainted wing, and that's going to get him grant funding or something. Tinkerbell watches Lizzie's interaction with her father, and she's like, I should stay behind and fix these leaks, because then her dad would have more time to spend with her. So she stays behind and fixes all the leaks. But she also lets the butterfly go. She opens up the jar and lets the butterfly go free. And the dad, of course, thinks that Lizzie did it, because he doesn't know that there's a fairy fluttering around in his house. And he's very disappointed in Lizzie and sends her to her room. And so Tinkerbell, to cheer her up, sprinkles pixie dust on Lizzie, and they fly around the room. Meanwhile, the rescue team has made it to the house. We get some comedy where they have to avoid this fat, evil cat. Meanwhile, Lizzie's dad goes to check on her because she's making a ton of noise, bumping into, like, her ceiling and walls and whatnot. And he's upset that she made this giant mess of her room. And again, Lizzie tries to defend herself, but she can't explain that it was because of a fairy. Same with explaining the butterfly situation. Like, she can't say, oh, it was a fairy that did this. So she just sounds like she's lying. But at this point, Tinkerbell's had enough, and she flies out and she yells at Lizzie's dad. And it just sounds like little wind chimes. And Lizzie's like, see, fairies are real. Like, this is what's been happening this whole time. And the dad is like, oh, fascinating. And he goes to trap Tinkerbell in a jar. And Vidya sees that Tinkerbell is about to be trapped in a jar, and she pushes Tinkerbell out of the way. And now she's trapped in a jar. And I don't know if the dad doesn't notice that there's two fairies, or if he thinks one fairy is good enough, but he leaves Tinkerbell and takes Vidya trapped in a jar. He's gonna go take Vidya to the museum committee. And I think now it's raining again or something. So in order to get to the museum, the fairies all stow away in Lizzie's coat and give Lizzie pixie dust to fly. And so she carries them flying to London. At some point, Tink flies out and sabotages the dad's car so he can't drive anymore and he has to continue on foot. And everyone makes it to the museum at the same time. And Lizzie is able to convince her father to let Vidya go. And then we put some pixie dust on the dad, and they all fly home together. The end. Then we get a Bridget Mendler credit song. You already know, I don't like this movie. It's all about humans and the mainland. Makes no sense that they're there. That's not how this is supposed to work. I think that adults think that kids want to meet a fairy, like capture one or be friends with one or something. No, I want to be a fairy. It's not cool to have a fairy friend. I mean, it's kind of cool, but not as cool of the fantasy of me being a fairy in Pixie Hollow. And this kind of ruins that because you're sort of framing Lizzie as this self-insert child character who becomes friends with Tinkerbell. That's not what I want. We also spend the whole movie not in Pixie Hollow. We're in like some girl's bedroom. That's lame. We're trying to make the dad believe in fairies. Fairies are real! No, they're not. Which, fairies being real kind of ruins all of science. So like, sorry King, I guess butterflies are painted by fairies. And the seasons are not because of Earth's rotation around the sun. Sorry you don't get your grant funding, I guess. I do like every time we cut to the rescue team and all of their group banter. That's very fun. I would rewatch just those scenes. I also like that Vidya gets a redemption arc in this movie. She's just like part of the gang now. She was pretty terrible in that first movie, but I guess, you know, we forgive and forget. Then in 2011, we get the TV special Pixie Hollow Games. All of the fairy talents are competing in some sort of Olympics, and the garden fairies historically always come in last place. But there's a new garden fairy named Chloe, and she's very excited to compete in the Pixie Hollow Games. Chloe is played by Brenda Song, which for some reason I found super distracting. There's some other recognizable voice actors in these movies, but Brenda Song was the only one where I was like, that's Brenda Song, and it took me out of it. I don't know if I'm just like more familiar with her voice, but that was a funny element of this viewing experience. Rosetta does not want to be involved in the Pixie Hollow Games. Also, from this movie forward, she is recast and played by Megan Hilty, which Megan Hilty and Kristen Chenoweth both played Glinda on Broadway. So I guess the casting people were like, she's close enough. And to be fair, I can't really hear a difference. So they did a good job choosing her. But unfortunately for Rosetta, it is her turn to participate in the games. She's gotten out of it too many times. We are also introduced to these Storm Talent Fairies. They're like the champions of the Pixie Hollow games. This is a talent that is new to this TV special, and they didn't really use outside of it. Jason Dooley from Good Luck Charlie plays the boy Storm Fairy, and Tiffany Thornton from Sunny with a Chance plays the girl Storm Fairy. For the first event, Rosetta comes dressed all glamorous and pretty, and she's like, well, we're gonna be eliminated first, so it doesn't even matter. It's like a frog jumping event, and so Rosetta does not want to sit on this frog. The race has already started. She's still not on the frog. She eventually gets on it, but then they're doing a very bad job with the hopping situation. The Animal Talent Fairies win this round, but the Healing Talent Fairies didn't even finish. So by default, the Garden Talent Fairies proceed to the next round. And this is like the first time that has ever happened. We check in with the Storm Fairies, and the boy fairy named Rumble is very upset that they didn't win this round. And the girl fairy, Glimmer, is more sportsmanlike about it. She's like, the Animal Talent Fairies deserve to win. It was fine. Then there's a montage of a lot of different events, and the Garden Talent Fairy team keeps advancing forward. This montage is set to a song by Zendaya. Then it's time for the second to last event. They race in teacups with pixie dust, and then they have to go down a slide covered in slug slime. They do a great job with the teacups, and then Chloe zips down the slide to pass the finish line first. But Rosetta does not want to get all dirty, and she doesn't want to go down the slide, so she walks down the slide. And so she and Chloe finish second to last, because the team members have to both cross the finish line for it to count. And Rosetta took a long time to get to the finish line. Rosetta feels bad about this, and she realizes she probably hasn't been trying her hardest. And so for the last event, she shows up all serious in a competition outfit. And this competition is a car race. And Tinkerbell, since the Tinker Talents had already been eliminated, she helped the Garden Talent Fairies modify their car to have special features. The Garden Talent Fairies end up in the lead, partly because they went through some mud, which was a big deal for Rosetta. But then at the last second, Rumble from the Storm team sabotages them with some lightning or whatever. But Rosetta and Chloe decide they're still going to be good sports and they're going to cross the finish line. And it turns out that Glimmer was so upset with Rumble being unsportsmanlike that she stayed back and she didn't cross the finish line. So Rumble crossing the finish line didn't count, the Storm Fairies don't win, and the Garden Talent Fairies win. This is a very cute special. It kind of reminds me of the book Rosetta's Daring Day. It's a book about Fawn and Rosetta. Fawn has to try being glamorous, and Rosetta has to try being adventurous. She has to get dirty. She rides on a frog. I feel like that was maybe in part the inspiration for this special. But I liked this. I liked that it was pretty low stakes. They're just playing a game. And it's very character focused and Rosetta focused, which obviously I love. The next movie is Secret of the Wings from 2012. In this movie, we get a retcon that only winter fairies go into the winter realm, which is called the Winter Woods. And winter fairies don't cross into the other realms. Boo, I don't like that. That's stupid. First of all, we saw winter fairies. Also, in the past, there was a minister for each of the seasons. And we saw the winter minister just hanging out with all the other ministers. Didn't seem to be a problem. She's gone now, never to be seen again. In that first movie, Tink, Clank, and Bobble flew over the winter realm. That was never a problem. And in video games like Pixie Hollow Online and the DS games, you could visit winter. But of course, Tinkerbell finds out that warm weather fairies can't go into the winter woods, and so she immediately wants to go see it. And so she volunteers to go with Fawn to help some of the animals cross over the border. And while Fawn is distracted, she steps over the border into winter, and her wings start to glow in a mysterious way. But before she can figure out what's going on there, Fawn freaks out and yanks her back, and she's taken to the Healing Talent Fairies. No one seems concerned about this whole glowing wings thing. No one seems interested in figuring it out. So she goes on her own to the library. She's going to try and research wings. But when she finds the book on wings, it turns out that the last page has been eaten by a bookworm. So there's no information about glowing wings. But then the nerdy little scribe talent fairy explains to Tinkerbell that all of the books are written by the keeper, and he would know what's supposed to be on that last page. But unfortunately, the keeper is in the winter woods. So Tinkerbell's like, okay, I have to go to the winter woods. So she makes herself a big coat and she tucks her wings inside because the cold is dangerous, but the biggest risk is that your wings are gonna like freeze and break like ice or something. So with her wings in her coat, they're protected from the elements. She then sneaks into a supply basket to get carried into the winter woods. She makes it in, but then her book on wings slides across the ice, and one of the winter talent fairies picks it up. Then the Lord of Winter, not the Minister of Winter from earlier, a different person, the Lord of Winter. His name is Lord Mallory, and he rides around on a snowy owl. And he tells this winter fairy to return the book to the keeper. So Tinkerbell follows this fairy to find out where the keeper lives, and she sneaks in there. The winter fairy drops off this book, but then another fairy comes, and this fairy is also asking the keeper about wings glowing. And then Tinkerbell comes out of her hiding spot, and now both her and the other winter fairy's wings are glowing. And we find out that their wings are glowing because they are identical. It's like a fingerprint. And their wings are identical because they are twin sisters born of the same laugh. This winter fairy is named Periwinkle, and she is played by Lucy Hale. Identical fairies being born of the same laugh is a thing in the book. One of the books, there's triplets, actually. But as a child, I hated that Tinkerbell had a surprise secret twin sister. I thought that was stupid. Then Lord Mallory shows up, so Tinkerbell and Periwinkle hide. And Lord Mallory is talking to the keeper, like, I'm worried that this random book about wings showed up here. I'm worried that possibly a warm weather fairy crossed over, which, as we all know, is forbidden. And the keeper is like, yep, I'll keep an eye out. The keeper's name is Dewey, because he's the Dewey Decimal System. I think it's cute. But he's chill, so he's going to let Periwinkle and Tinkerbell hang out for a little while before he makes Tinkerbell go back. And so Tinkerbell and Periwinkle hang out, and they find out that they have everything in common. They like all of the same things. They both wear the little puffballs on their shoes. I find this to be a boring introduction to a new character. She's the same as an existing character. That's useless to me. That's lame. But then at one point, Tinkerbell falls down, like off a cliff, and she is not able to fly because her wings are in her coat. But at the last second, Dewey comes in and rescues her. He's like riding on a lynx cat, some sort of cold weather animal. And he's like, listen, you guys, this is too dangerous. I'm going to send Tinkerbell back. But of course, Tinkerbell and Periwinkle make plans to meet at the border the next day. And so in the night, Tinkerbell tells her friends about her secret surprise sister, and they invent a snow machine. So Periwinkle is able to cross into the warm weather, and they like rain snow down on her so she stays cold. They show Periwinkle around, they're having a great time, and then they run out of ice. And Periwinkle's wings start to melt, I guess, or like get really floppy and flimsy, and I guess they would tear easily. It's less dramatic than them getting cold and breaking, but so they panic and they take her back to the border, and Lord Mallory is there, and he's like, you two are forbidden from seeing each other. And then Queen Clarion shows up, and they're like, Queen Clarion, won't you let us spend time together? And Queen Clarion is like, no, because it's my rule that crossing the border is forbidden. And so later, she tells Tinkerbell there were once two fairies from either side of winter, and they were in love. And so they broke the rules and they crossed the border, but then one of the fairies broke a wing, for which there is no cure, and they realized what they were doing was too dangerous, and so they agreed to say goodbye. Meanwhile, Lord Mallory, on his snowy owl, knocks the snow machine into the river at the border of winter and the warm fairies. But the snow machine gets stuck downstream, and ice keeps getting stuck in the snow machine and making more snow. Very quickly, it seems, throwing the seasons out of balance. And so now, the cold, the winter, the freeze is traveling across Pixie Hollow outside of the winter realm, and it's going to reach the pixie dust tree. And if it freezes the pixie dust tree, then the pixie dust tree is going to die, and no one's going to have pixie dust ever again. And everyone's freaking out, and then Tinkerbell realizes that a layer of frost could keep the pixie dust tree alive, because earlier we gave Periwinkle a periwinkle flower, like the flower that is named Periwinkle, and Periwinkle put frost around the flower, which preserved it in the state it was in before it was frozen. And so Tinkerbell realizes we could do that on a large scale with the tree. So Tinkerbell flies into the winter realm, even though that means that her wings are exposed, and she asks the winter fairies for help. So all the winter fairies come, and they put a layer of frost on the tree and wherever else they can manage to get to in time. And Lord Mallory comes, and he takes off his coat, and he puts it around Queen Clarion. And then we finally get the reveal that Lord Mallory's wing is broken, and Lord Mallory and Queen Clarion are the couple from the tragic story. But then the tree is saved, the plan worked, and everything somehow goes back to normal. I don't understand that part. And everyone's excited and celebrating, but Tink doesn't seem happy. And everyone's like, "What, Tink, what's wrong?" And we find out that when she flew into winter, her wing broke. And everyone's very sad. And they're also very sad because they have to say goodbye to the winter fairies. And Tink and Periwinkle put their wings together to represent their sisterhood or whatever. But it turns out that if you have identical wings and your wing is broken and you put your wings together with the identical wings, it heals your wing. So then Tink's wing is healed, which is a massive cop-out. So now Tink's wing is back to normal, and it is decided that everyone can cross back and forth between the winter border, and the solution to keep your wings safe is to put a layer of frost on your wings, and that'll keep your wings safe while you're traveling in winter. So you don't even have to have your wings in a coat. You can just have them out and covered in frost. The end. Then we get a end credit song by China Anne McClain and her sisters. So I hated that Tinkerbell had a secret sister as a kid. I saw it in the trailer for this movie, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. If Tinkerbell had a sister, we'd know about it, because the Laugh pieces still traveled together to Pixie Hollow. And then I realized that there was a retcon where now winter is completely separate, and that's how it was secret. I understand from a writing perspective, having the high stakes and danger of winter being like harsh and unforgiving. It's a dangerous and forbidden place. That's much more exciting. But I'm annoyed that they never tried to explain it. I think they thought kids won't notice or it won't matter. But this is a pretty massive status quo change. I think kids are smarter than that. You need to give them some credit. Write in some flimsy justification. Also, Periwinkle is boring. Tinkerbell, I would say, is also a little bit boring. A lot of the time she's just characterized as friendly, but I'd say she has a lot of interesting character traits. She's very curious, she's stubborn, she's reckless, she has a temper sometimes when they choose to include that. Periwinkle is just nice, and she likes everything that Tinkerbell does. That's how you can tell that they're twins. I guess on the nature versus nurture debate, we're saying that identical twins raised separately in completely different environments are gonna like identical things. I feel like maybe they were trying to not take attention away from Tink. Like they didn't want to make Periwinkle and Tinkerbell like compete for favor from children. I don't know. Because Periwinkle also takes less risks than Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell travels across the border into winter to ask about the wing situation. I feel like they could have made her more adventurous. She's not a Tinker talent, so she wouldn't do anything exciting with inventions like Tinkerbell does. But maybe she does something with frost. Like maybe she does I don't know. I was gonna say extreme sports frost snowboarding or something. Like she uses her ice powers to like do crazy tricks or something. I don't know. I'm not an adventurous person, so I don't know what would be a good thing, but something like fun and cool and different from Tinkerbell. Also, I hate the wing thing. They have identical wings. That makes them glow. Fine. Tinkerbell's wing gets damaged and they fix it through the power of sisterhood. The magic of their wings being identical. Which, like, sucks for Lord Mallory. I guess romantic love can't fix wings, only sister love can. If I was Queen Clarion, I'd be like, babe, put your wings up. Let's see if that works. Like, let's just try it out. I know logically Disney was never gonna have Tinkerbell lose a wing and be unable to fly. First of all, this is considered a prequel origin story series to Peter Pan, and she has her wings in Peter Pan. So just from like a timeline perspective, they can't do that. Also, she's like their main lead character and an iconic Disney character. They weren't going to change the status quo with her that much. But it makes for a very weak moment because her wing is only broken for like a minute and then they fix it immediately. In the books, there was a character named Ronnie, yes, that's how it's pronounced, and she loses her wings, and then she uses a bird as like a mobility aid, exactly like Lord Mallory. And kids love Ronnie. I think maybe the movie makers were afraid of having a character lose a wing, and that would be like too sad, but I think kids would have been cool with it. So my proposal is that Periwinkle loses her wing, because Periwinkle is a new character you just invented. It doesn't break the lore if she's unable to fly. Maybe she has the idea to cover the pixie dust tree in frost. I mean, she is a frost fairy. This is kind of her expertise. And so she flies to the warm seasons to tell Tink her idea. And this is before the cold has spread there. So her wing gets hurt. And at the end of the movie, she gets like a bird to ride around on. Maybe we could set the bird up earlier. Maybe it's like one of Fawn's animals that she's helping to cross the border. And maybe Tink, since she's an inventor, can invent something to help Periwinkle. It could be a prosthetic wing. I don't necessarily want it to be that because Ronnie didn't have that and that was fine. Maybe it's something to help her with her extreme sports snowboarding. I don't know. I think they just missed the opportunity for some really cool disability representation, you know? I think Hiccup in How to Train Your Dragon, he like loses part of a leg and gets a prosthetic or something. I haven't seen those movies, sorry. But that's the only character I can think of where a main character becomes disabled and it's just fine and the story just continues on, you know? I think they could have done that with Periwinkle and it would have been sad and impactful, but also like kind of cool, you know? If you have a limb difference or use a mobility aid or anything like that, please let me know your thoughts. Another thing that's crazy about this movie is the parallels to Frozen, right? It's a winter and ice themed story about sisterhood. The sisters are forced apart and one is injured by the cold, but the power of sisterhood heals her. That's a crazy coincidence, but I don't think they had anything to do with each other. This movie was 2012, Frozen was 2013. They were technically kind of made by different studios because the Tinkerbell movies were made by Disney Toon Studios. There must have just been something in the air at Disney. I also love the additional world building in this movie. We get to see the healing talents in action. We've had them mentioned before, but now we actually get to like meet them and see them. And we also get a library and a scribe talent and an author. So there's a lot of cool stuff in this movie that expands the world of Pixie Hollow. The next movie is The Pirate Fairy from 2013. This movie follows the character Zarina, who is played by Christina Hendricks. She is a pixie dust fairy, and she wants to experiment with pixie dust. She's curious about how pixie dust works and why it works that way, if there are other colors of pixie dust other than blue, how the blue pixie dust revitalizes the pixie dust tree. She has a ton of questions. But Fairy Gary, the leader of the pixie dust talents, is against this. He's like, don't do any experiments on pixie dust. It is too dangerous. It's like pure magical essence. It's the lifeblood of our society. Like, just leave it alone and accept it as it is. But of course she doesn't do that. One day she gets a fleck of blue pixie dust on her as she's helping Fairy Gary to put 27 specks of blue pixie dust into the pixie dust spout or whatever. And she takes the blue pixie dust back to her house to experiment on it. And with the blue pixie dust, she is able to invent other colors of pixie dust. And these other colors emulate different talents. So like the pink pixie dust emulates garden talents. She goes to grab Tinkerbell, because Tinkerbell is the other unconventional rebel of this society, and she shows Tinkerbell all of her pixie dust. And Tinkerbell is a little bit concerned. She's like, let's maybe be careful with this. Like, I don't know what's going on here. This seems a little bit dangerous. And then Zarina accidentally spills a bunch of pink pixie dust onto a plant. And the plant grows huge because of the garden talentness of the pixie dust. And the plant grows all over and into the pixie dust depot and like destroys it. And Fairy Gary is sort of disappointed and upset, and he tells Zarina not to come back because this is all too dangerous. Zarina either interpreted that to mean leave Pixie Hollow altogether, or she interpreted it as don't come back to be a pixie dust talent, and since that's her whole passion, she decided that she may as well just leave Pixie Hollow because there was no reason for her to be there anymore. One of the two interpretations. So Zarina leaves Pixie Hollow. Then we cut to 1 year later, and there is a festival with everyone in Pixie Hollow. They're all at the same place at the same time, and Zarina comes back to take advantage of this moment. And she uses some of her doctored pixie dust to make these big poppies that put everyone to sleep, and she sneaks into the dust depot to steal the blue pixie dust. The only people left awake are our girl gang, because they figured out what was happening and they hid in, like, their parade float or whatever. And Clank is still awake, because he was at the bathroom. So the girls tell Clank to watch over everyone, and they go follow Zarina. And they find out that Zarina is in league with pirates. The girls try to steal the blue dust back from Zarina, but she throws a bunch of different colored pixie dust at them, which then switches everyone's talents. So then we get the comedy of, like, Rosetta is now an animal talent fairy, even though she finds all of these different creatures gross. And Vidya is now a tinker talent fairy, which she hates. And no one has good control over their new talents, and so they're making a giant mess every time they try and do something. So they're figuring out their new talents, and they make it to the beach, where they try and make a boat so that they can follow the pirate ship. And while they're on the beach, a crocodile is born, and this baby crocodile imprints on Rosetta because she was the first one there and she has the animal talent. But they leave the crocodile there and they are able to make it to the pirate ship, and they all sneak on board. Then the pirates sing a song about, like, conquering the world or whatever. This is the one singular music number in this series. I don't know why it's here. I don't know why they added this. Maybe to kill time? Maybe because someone had a fun idea? I don't know. But they sing this song, and we meet the pirate James, who is able to communicate with Zarina. Because usually humans just hear bells tinkling, but James is able to communicate with Zarina. And James is played by Tom Hiddleston. Maybe it was Tom Hiddleston's fault. Maybe he was like, I want to sing a song in this movie. If you're going to cast me in this kid's movie, I want to sing. I don't know enough about that man to know. Our girl gang spies on the pirates, and they learn that Zarina is growing her own pixie dust tree, and she needed the blue dust to, like, activate it. So they sail to the tree, which is inside of the skull rock thing. Tinkerbell and her friends try to steal the blue dust one more time, but they are captured by the pirates. And then, right after Zarina activates this pixie dust tree, she is then also captured and betrayed by the pirates. They were just using her to get some pixie dust. Tinkerbell and her friends are in a little wooden crate in the under part of the boat. I don't know, boat terms. And Zarina is inside of one of those old-timey glass lanterns. Then we get the reveal that James is Captain Hook. He, like, puts on the red coat and the hat, and he's like, haha, fairies are so gullible. But then the baby crocodile shows up. It followed Rosetta here from the beach. And Rosetta is able to sort of guide the crocodile to free them from this wooden grate. I remember when I first watched this movie, like, 2 years ago, I did not realize that this crocodile was the crocodile from Peter Pan until, like, really late in the movie. Possibly not until this point did I go, oh, it's a crocodile, because it's the Captain Hook TikTok crocodile thing. Oh, because I spend so much of my time trying to ignore Peter Pan that I forgot the lore. But there is, of course, famously a crocodile in Peter Pan. That was not just a random animal earlier. I'm sure some of you already figured that out, but I did feel foolish watching this movie again, knowing what I know now. I'm like, oh. Then Tink and her friends are able to finally successfully steal the blue pixie dust. But then James threatens to drop Zarina into the ocean in this lantern thing. And so she wouldn't be able to fly. And also her wings would get wet, and so she would drown and die. And so Tink begrudgingly returns the blue pixie dust. And James, because he's a scoundrel, he drops Zarina anyway. And then he uses all the new pixie dust from the pixie dust tree to make his pirate ship fly. The girls are able to successfully rescue Zarina from the lantern, and they decide to all go together to the ship and get the blue pixie dust back. We get a long, whimsical fight scene of everyone using their different powers. There's some sword fighting, a lot of flying with pixie dust. At some point, the crocodile eats a clock, so there's your origin story on that. But the girls are able to successfully steal the blue dust, and dump all the pirates into the ocean. Then they go back to Pixie Hollow, they wake everybody back up, and Zarina is welcomed back. And she's asked, like, what do you call this talent of yours? And she says, pixie dust alchemy. The end. The end credit song is by Natasha Bedingfield. And there's a mid-credit scene where Captain Hook is rescued by Smee. Not a younger looking Smee, even though this is taking place in the past, just a recognizable Smee, so that we all go, I don't want Peter Pan stuff in my Tinkerbell. I know that's fighting a losing battle, but I don't want it. I also don't really like pirates, like aesthetically, the whole vibe. I'm just not interested. This movie kind of feels like they were running out of ideas. Like, what if Captain Hook had a fairy, like how Peter Pan had a fairy? And what if everybody switches their talents? It's like, what? It's kind of random. But it is a fairly fun movie. There's a lot of banter in the girl group, a lot of chaos with their switched around talents. That's all very fun. I don't like Zarina. Maybe part of it is her voice. She always sounds so cocky. I just find her kind of annoying. I don't know. And that is a good part of this movie. So too bad for me, I guess. It is unfair how Zarina is treated because she ruins the Dust Depot and then she's told that she doesn't get to be a dust talent fairy anymore. I don't think they were necessarily kicking her out of Pixie Hollow. I think they maybe would have come around and forgiven her, but still pretty harsh, right? Whereas when Tinkerbell ruined Spring, everyone just kind of like glared at her like she was still a Tinker talent. Everyone was just upset. She was also going to leave in disgrace, but then she had that heart-to-heart with Terrence. Maybe Zarina just needed to talk to a cute boy, I don't know. And then everyone forgives her when she comes back, which I will quibble with that because the Dust Depot thing was an accident. This scheme was on purpose. I don't know if anyone even finds out the scheme that she pulled. They don't tell Queen Clarion and Fairy Gary, so I don't know if they know. A little bit odd. The last movie is The Legend of the Neverbeast from 2014. This is a movie that is focused on Fawn. This is an interesting idea. I wish they could have done more of it, doing a movie focused on one of the side characters as opposed to just Tinkerbell. Arguably, that's kind of what the Pirate Fairy is, but she was a new character, so it didn't feel the same, as opposed to focusing on one of our pre-established girl gang. In this movie, Fawn is restyled to have an animal print skirt as opposed to pants, and she has more makeup on her face, which I don't love. She is voiced in this movie by Jennifer Goodwin. America Ferrera only voiced Fawn in movie number 1, and then after that she was voiced by Angela Bardes. But Fawn always had so few dialogue lines that it kind of doesn't matter. The fact that they cast America Ferrera for that first movie does feel to me like maybe she was supposed to be Latina or Hispanic. So I wish that they had maintained that in the casting for when she got her own full movie. That could have been nice, but they didn't do that. So we learn that Fawn is sort of the reckless Tinkerbell equivalent of the animal talent fairies. She likes to help even the dangerous animals. So like she helps nurse a baby hawk back to health, which is almost a disaster. Which then we meet a scout talent fairy named Nyx, who is played by Rosario Dawson. Scout talent fairies, if I haven't fully explained, are lookouts. They help protect Pixie Hollow from predators and threats. They're in the books also. Nyx and Fawn are always kind of at odds because Nyx wants to keep Pixie Hollow safe and Fawn keeps bringing in these dangerous animals, which I think is a fair complaint. Fawn promises to stop messing with dangerous animals. But then, one day she hears a big, mysterious roar, and she's like, well, I gotta investigate that. And she finds a strange, large creature that she's never seen before. It seems upset because it has a thorn in its paw, so she helps it get the thorn out. And then she sort of watches it because she wants to learn about what this animal is. The main thing it's doing is building these giant rock towers using its own spit as like mortar to like stick the rocks together. And she's like, that's really weird. I don't know why you're doing that. She names the creature Gruff, and the two of them start to become friends. At some point, she starts helping it with collecting rocks for these rock towers. And at one point, she floats the rocks with pixie dust, and they play a game where they like kick the rocks. But Gruff hits the rocks into Sunflower Meadow, kind of destroying it. And so now the Scout Talent Fairies are definitely aware that something's up. They try to find this mysterious creature, but Fawn is able to hide Gruff. So Fawn decides, this has gone too far, I need to show Gruff to Queen Clarion. But meanwhile, Nyx is like, I need to figure out what this creature is. I'm gonna go to the library to do some research. And in the library, one of the scribe talent fairies has been tasked with researching this mysterious green comet that showed up a few days ago. And she sees an image of this creature in his research. And she's like, tell me everything you know about this creature. And she finds out that the creature is called the Neverbeast. It was last seen 900 and something years ago, and it builds rock towers. And then this green fog shows up, and there's this lightning storm, and the creature transforms into a flying beast, and it destroys Pixie Hollow. And so Nyx is like, we need to capture this creature. And so Fawn shows up to talk to Queen Clarion about Gruff, at the same time that Nyx shows up to talk to Queen Clarion about capturing this Neverbeast. And Fawn is like, okay, I'm not going to tell Queen Clarion about this anymore. I'm going to leave. The next day, the green fog appears, just like in the legend. And so the scouts are after Gruff. They're trying to find this Neverbeast. Fawn is trying to warn Gruff to get him to hide or something. And she sends Tinkerbell to go check in the Winter Realm for Gruff. But then Gruff hits Tinkerbell and, like, knocks her out. And then Gruff grows horns and wings and, like, roars. And we're all like, uh-oh. Oh no, that's bad. And Fawn is like, I guess my friend Gruff is some sort of evil, terrible monster. And so she finally goes to the scouts and she helps the scouts capture Gruff. But even when Gruff is captured, the storm doesn't stop. We thought that Gruff was like causing the storm. He does not seem to be what's causing it. He does not seem to be the problem. Then Tinkerbell wakes up and she's like, oh no, Gruff saved me. A tree got hit by the lightning storm and was going to fall and crush me. And Gruff pushed me out of the way. And so Fawn is like, oh, I was right all along. Gruff is great. So her and her friends go and free Gruff. And we realize that Gruff is meant to be collecting the lightning from the rock towers. The rock towers are built to be very, very tall, so lightning hits them because they're the tallest things. And so he then goes to the rock towers and, like, absorbs the lightning into his horns and body, protecting Pixie Hollow from the lightning. But unfortunately, Gruff can't really see well right now because of all the knockout potions that the scouts used. But he can see Fawn's glow. So Fawn leads him to all the different rock towers. But then, unfortunately, Nyx, who is misguidedly trying to save Pixie Hollow, knocks down the last tower, which messes up all the lightning collection. And so to get the last of the lightning, Fawn realizes that she has to lead Gruff into the eye of the storm. They make it, Gruff absorbs all the lightning, and the storm clears. And then both Gruff and Fawn are sort of knocked out, and all the fairies help pixie dust float them to safety. Gruff wakes back up, but Fawn does not. And a healing talent fairy is sort of looking over Fawn and nods her head no, because Fawn is dead. And Gruff is, of course, very upset, so he goes to, like, nuzzle Fawn and, like, cry over her or whatever. But the very last bit of lightning still in his fur, like, shocks her awake. Then we cut to later. Fawn is writing about Gruff so that future fairies have a record of him. And we get a little montage of him helping fairies. And then they realize that it's time for Gruff to hibernate because his work is done. And he's going to hibernate for another 900 and something years, which means they'll never see him again. I don't know the lifespan of fairies. I guess not that long, though. So they bring him to his little cave for hibernation, but they've made it all cozy with, like, a pillow and fresh water. And Fawn cries and says goodbye and kisses his nose. The end. The movie ends right there. End credit song is by someone I've never heard of. Why did they do it like that? That's so sad. I cried a little bit at the end. I can imagine being a small child. If I were in charge, I would have flipped it around. I would have had them very sadly put Gruff to bed and then cut to Fawn writing this record and, like, a montage of Gruff being nice. I feel like that would have been slightly less sad, a slightly more positive, like, oh, we'll always love you and remember you and you were so great, as opposed to, like, I'm so sad to say goodbye. Cut to black. I don't know. But other than that, pretty solid movie. And then after that, Disney Toon Studios, who had been making these movies, shut down. And I guess they thought that they should also stop making Tinkerbell movies. They had probably been having diminishing returns. The brand was probably declining. But I think they could have kept making them. You know? Kids are always going to like fairies. I think they would have continued to do pretty well, right? Maybe they thought, we have 6, that's enough. Kids can just keep watching these same 6 movies forever. At some point, I hope they revitalize this franchise. Maybe make a Disney Plus streaming show or something. They have been doing more Tinkerbell stuff recently, which makes me hopeful. There have been some new books and also a new ride in Tokyo Disneyland. So they're still keeping up with the brand, at least a little bit. But that's all I have for you today. A big thank you to my patrons and a special shout out to Court, Austin Poston, and Melanie Mermaid, which if you didn't know, I have a Patreon where I post some monthly bonus content and outtakes. It's just another way to support me, no pressure. I am Sarah Seraph on all social media, and I don't know how to end a YouTube video. So, bye!